Welcome to Reaching World Podcast, where we highlight the world's largest network of influencers for good, love, and service. Join us in saying thank you to these incredible individuals and organizations by listening, subscribing, and sharing their legacies. And by doing this together, we will help inspire others to leave their legacy of service and love. I'm your host, Zach Garner. Hey guys, once again, welcome to Reaching World Podcast Season 2. I'm your host, Zach Garner. I'm very excited for this season. Man, the list of guests we have this season will be phenomenal and absolutely help you understand and see a wider perspective of all the good going on in the world, along with helping you overcome any obstacles that's holding you back to going the next level in your business ventures, in your entrepreneur pursuits, all kinds of great things. So let's get started. This episode, we are highlighting the CEO of Direct Relief, one of the largest nonprofits in the world that helps raise and evolve with over billions of dollars of efforts, from medical supplies to food, water, shelter, and things like that for those affected by natural disasters. Thomas Tighe is president and CEO of Direct Relief. And before joining Direct Relief in October of 2000, Thomas served for 5 years as Chief of Staff and Chief Operating Officer at the Peace Corps. He's a native to Palo Alto, California, and he has a bachelor's degree from the University of Berkeley, and he also has his law degree from Hastings College. Thomas was kind enough to spend 10 to 15 minutes with us on this season of Reaching World Podcast and to talk about his story and what got him to becoming the CEO of Direct Relief. Not only does he go in a little bit of his backstory, but he talks about his mission and his purpose at Direct Relief and things they're doing to directly impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of people all across the world. So we wanted to highlight him and his efforts and his teams and his organization for all the good, love, and service that they are directly involved with all across the world. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. This is Thomas introducing himself.
Hi, I'm Thomas Tighe. I'm president and CEO of Direct Relief, and it's my pleasure to be on your podcast, Zach. My background, totally uninteresting to me, but, one of 4 kids. I was an Army brat who moved around. My dad was a West Point grad who sadly was killed in Vietnam when I was 6 years old. So I was raised by my mom with my 3 siblings up in San Francisco Bay Area, and kind of a product of Catholic school, old school grammarian nuns and public colleges and University of California law school. And then after completing law school, I actually signed up. I went into the Peace Corps to be a Peace Corps volunteer, which is something that always had seemed quite interesting and compelling. Just not the best career path to go into the Peace Corps after you finish law school and take the bar and pass. But, for me, I ended up spending 2.5 years in Thailand as a Peace Corps volunteer, which was terrific. I really appreciated the opportunity to both work and live and learn another language in a way that was simply just to help. I was a teacher of English. I came back and ended up being hired in the U.S. Senate as a lawyer for Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. And I also had kind of collateral duty as a lawyer on the Foreign Relations Committee. My boss was the chairman of that subcommittee. And his name was Alan Cranston. He was from California, as was I. And so he had, multiple committee assignments. I ended up working in the Veterans Affairs Committee, which was sort of personal. That's how I was able to go to college and law school and the VA benefits because of my father. So that was really, quite rewarding to be part of helping make sure the benefits programs that serve veterans and their families, I had a small part just from that role. And then the other hat, on the Foreign Relations Committee, looking at really the Peace Corps from how Congress looks at it, which basically is it still a good idea? Is it worth the money that you have to appropriate and spend? And because I had just gotten out of the Peace Corps, I think that's how I got the assignment. And Senator Cranston had been a longtime supporter. So that was a run of about 5 years on Capitol Hill for me. And when President Clinton was elected, I went down to the Peace Corps headquarters, first as the Associate General Counsel, basically to do what I had been doing up on Capitol Hill, working with Congress, making sure the funding was intact and kind of advising the Peace Corps director on things that, I knew based on my prior experience. After a year and a half, I was asked to be the Chief of Staff and Chief Operating Officer of the Peace Corps just because of the turnover. So that was, 5 or 6 years after I had just been a Peace Corps volunteer, which is the best job in the Peace Corps, and then end up as the chief operating officer and chief of staff, dealing with all the bad stuff and just all the, it was a great experience. I was, 35 years old or something, but it was a really, I cared a lot about the Peace Corps. I knew a lot about its history and legacy, and thought it was quite an honor for me to have that role, which I continued to do until 2000, when I was learned about Direct Relief, that was doing a recruitment. I really knew nothing about the nonprofit sector, foundations and nonprofits, just like I guess most people who aren't steeped in them. And the more I learned, it was back here in California, they ended up asking me if I would take on the job that I still hold and occupy, which has been a real privilege to join Direct Relief, that had its own great tradition of service. Although from a private perspective, separate from political, Direct Relief isn't a political organization. It's we work with everyone. It's secular. It's not affiliated with any religion, but works groups of all faiths on all places, so long as they don't discriminate. So I think it's kind of, for me, I guess I got here by doing kind of public service, and I still feel like it is. And, what it feels like every day is not unlike what I did at the Peace Corps or even in the Senate. It's public service, but like much of public service these days, a lot of it's done privately, because, that's where there's all sorts of opportunities outside of the strictly government program for people to serve. And, it's been an honor and privilege to be part of Direct Relief and do what we can do from a private perspective.
That's great. It sounds like from your background and your experience and everything you've been involved with, you really were prepped for the role you have now as CEO of Direct Relief. So transitioning over to Direct Relief, understanding your background, tell us a little bit more about the beginnings of Direct Relief and its structure and its mission and purpose to the world.
Yeah, I think that Direct Relief was, formally established in 1948, and it was founded by a businessman, really successful businessmen who had to flee Europe under persecution by the Nazis. And they were a man named William Zimden, who I never met him. He passed away long before I was born, but it was really his money that he had earned as kind of an industrialist, sort of a tycoon of the era of the early first half of the last century, and had amassed a fortune. He was from Estonia, and I think when Adolf Hitler tried to recruit industrialists to the National Socialist cause, I think he was rising to power in Europe, and attempted to recruit Mr. Zimden, as we've learned from the historical documents. And I think Mr. Zimden's reaction was, what a pathetic fool of a little man is this? What a complete, he thought, which put him immediately on the hit list of Hitler, and which is why he ended up fleeing and ending up, of all places, in Santa Barbara, California, which is where he founded what's now Direct Relief, really as a personal initiative with his own money, just sending food and cash to people that he knew personally throughout war-torn Europe and post-war Europe. And I think what the model of Direct Relief, being private, working with businesses, was really because of his background. I think his natural inclination as a war immigrant who's a business person is to what could he do with the business contacts and business know-how. And I think he approached some of the companies and with kind of a pretty simple appeal, as I understand it. Basically, look, people in Europe need what you make, but they can't afford it. So how about giving them some, and I'm putting my own money behind this. And because you're these big businesses, you have the benefit of scale and efficiency. And, it's not going to hurt your business because you're not losing a sale potentially because these people aren't able to buy right now. So I think it was purely humanitarian in nature, and trying to really encourage the participation of businesses who do, if you're a successful business, you're doing something really well. And I think that same approach and model is something that has carried forward, and we still try to apply that thinking when we have a situation, whether it's the current situation unfolding in the Carolinas with Hurricane Florence. Who can we, ask that does something really well that we think might be needed, whether it's, transportation or logistics, and FedEx has been an amazing example of their support to direct relief has been critical to what everything direct relief does. Medical manufacturers who, they know people need help in these situations. And they also know that they're not going to show up on their sales forecasts because oftentimes they're poor or they're just in a crisis. So I think trying to work on a regular basis with businesses and kind of share with them the perspective that we see, which is much different than what they're looking at typically. That really has been part of what Direct Relief tries to do. And then as well as just engaging with members of the public, it's all voluntary. And so we thought, look, here's what we're trying to do. We think these people need help. Here's what we think makes a lot of sense. Here's who we're working with in these local communities or foreign countries, and try to extend an invitation for people to participate. Not so much, the aggressive fundraising and that sort of thing is not our style, but really just trying to make sure that the work is focused on something important and staying clear of all the, as you mentioned when we spoke earlier, just kind of everything today seems so highly charged politically, and I think the people who work here and the people we work with, they're not really focused on that. They really want to just make their lives better and help their families, their communities, their countries, and it's really energizing and inspiring. Makes you want to work harder for them. So,
yeah, that is incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Now, along those lines, I know from the beginning to today, what's going on right now, you've had lots of experiences, been involved with lots of projects, lots of fundraising events. Would you mind focusing on maybe just two highlights, maybe recent projects you have been involved with?
Yeah, there's, I think that I can give you maybe an example of a programmatic project and kind of one of these public engagement slash sort of fundraising projects. And the first one was something that we feel really good about. It was it's become our hurricane preparedness program, and I mention that because it's the situation in unfolding now with Hurricane Florence, as it did a year ago with Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. This for us is something that our ability to respond in a thoughtful, fast way is really because of what started 12 or 13 years ago with Hurricane Katrina and then Hurricane Rita. And what we found at the time was that, when people have to evacuate rapidly, a lot of them in the United States, a lot of people have chronic illnesses. They have asthma or diabetes or hypertension in particular. Those are pretty common ailments. And what we saw after and during Hurricanes Katrina and Rita is that the people who ended up in the hospitals were not there because they had been injured by the storm or, but it's basically because they were evacuated rapidly and they didn't have their insulin if they were diabetic, or they didn't have their inhaler if they had asthma, or their hypertensive medication So if you have a chest pain or you can't breathe or you go into a coma because you're lacking insulin, of course you have to go to the emergency room. And working with people in Texas, the nonprofit community health centers, we thought, these are things that we can anticipate and avert if we pre-position materials. So let's figure out what those things are that, if available, would have averted all these unnecessary trips to the emergency room. So for the last 12 years now, we've got basically a large pre-positioning program throughout all the hurricane-prone areas, based on initially that experience that we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clinicians who've been through it. So we can basically have a pharmacy, not in a box, but in a series of boxes that are waterproof, ruggedized, that contain all the essential elements that, and we pre-position those throughout all the Gulf states and Eastern Seaboard. So there were a lot in in North Carolina. There were several in Puerto Rico for this year's hurricane. There were a bunch in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama last year, and they were all used in Texas when Hurricane Harvey rolled in, some of the first materials. And so that was rewarding. That's something that, it's not particularly high profile, but it was the product of a lot of input where people were really generous with their insights. And it was nice that it worked, because we saw the consequence of not doing that. So our hurricane preparedness program was rewarding and, I think important, if not high profile or particularly sexy for anyone else, but it was really important for us. And it's worked. It's been validated and adjusted. I think the other thing that might be interesting, I did a little background check on you before I talked to you because I was nervous about, and I saw that you were advertised as a gaming enthusiast or gamer. And I'll tell you, one of the most fun things for me over the past several years has been the involvement of people, the gaming community. I didn't know what a speed-a-thon was, where people who like set world records for some of these classic video games. So we've had gamers on Twitch who have large followings and kind of sponsors who've kind of come in and thrown in behind Direct Relief and used their skills and talent and energy, and they've put together fundraising marathons. The first one called Zeldathon, these kind of group of guys out in Pennsylvania. And I'm kind of old, so I remember when Pong came out. So I wasn't, I have 4 kids, and I wasn't really steeped in it. But it's been such a fun, fascinating way to see how many people who spend a lot of their personal time doing online gaming and really smart, and kind of the whole culture of which is huge. They've been really generous and encouraging, and have engaged, and now we set up something called Direct Relief Gaming on our website. You can look at it. So we thought if people want ever to do that, you can stream yourself on Twitch, and they've helped us figure out how people could do it and have contributions if people want to encourage them, have the money through Tiltify come into Direct Relief, and it's been sort of really a whole different world, and tens of thousands of people have contributed, and Twitch itself and the kind of Bungie, the gaming company, hasn't been involved. A lot of the gamers, and it's been really just a fun. And for me, it's really encouraging to see how people can do what they care about and love, and direct the proceeds and the energy, the positive energy from that, towards helping people who need help. And Direct Relief has certainly been the channel that they've chosen. And so Direct Relief Gaming has been kind of a little odd for kind of what we do, but super fun and rewarding and energizing for us on staff. Like, there's these people who are crazy good at their, very skilled at their, what they love in gaming, and that they're part of it too. So that's sort of fun.
Wow, that is fun. If I'm listening to the podcast today and I'm getting inspired to be a part of Direct Relief, how might someone listening to the podcast today get involved?
Yeah, I think increasingly that's, the easiest way to kind of engage with Direct Relief is just online. I think we're based in California. We try to keep the information current through our website, our public website primarily, but also increasingly through the Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter, and I think to follow us, we try to, I think overwhelmingly what we do is just talk about the work and try to share with anyone who's interested, what we're learning. The Direct Relief is, at the end of the day, a support organization. I think we're not basically trying to, gather resources for us to consume. We're trying to gather resources because we have specialized licensing and accreditation to handle prescription drugs, for example. And so that's really a narrow lens on some of these situations. In emergencies, people who are involved in them, they need food and water and shelter and transportation and medicine. So we're sensitive that Direct Relief does not do everything that people need, but what we do is one of the key things. We try to focus on how to do that well. So I think we try to share that perspective with what we're hearing based on our ongoing work, and which is basically in communities where people don't. The least resourced communities. I think kind of when you say poor communities, it sounds almost like a pejorative sometimes, but these are places and people who often with the least financial means. And I think they just are particularly hard hit in emergencies. And, it's not great on a good day. So I think they require things that they can't afford. So that in general is the lens that we have on the world on the one hand. And we also engage with, some of the biggest, most sophisticated companies in the world, trying to connect the resources that they may be willing to make available. So it's, So I think in any given day, we may have the experience of, talking to senior people at FedEx who really want to help, and they know what they do can be helpful in a situation, as well as the people in the situation who are living through it, trying to advise us of what the situation is, what's required, how we can come in. And we end up doing a lot of really logistics, supply chain work to try to connect, build a pipeline rapidly that is secure and transparent and efficient, to mobilize and connect resources in emergencies. And basically, that's what we do every day. You just have to do more of it and faster when these emergency situations arise. And I think so. The Facebook page is good. Twitter is sort of like just little snippets that can often link to the Facebook or the website. We have a blog, kind of a news feed that we have kind of really almost some human interest stories as well as news that comes out pretty much every day or close to it.
Okay.
And then the historical repository of information just about our history and, Mr. Zimden and all that, and all of our financial information and bylaws and things that are important, if not, urgently interesting at any one moment, but they're important to have out there for people to understand about any organization, I think. And so we have all that stuff on our public website as well.
Fantastic. Hey, Thomas, we appreciate your time today. It's been a great call. I've truly enjoyed learning more about direct relief. And if there's one thing you'd like to leave, if you could have a billboard that everybody could read or view, what would that one billboard say, whether it's your statement or your organization's statement? What's that one thing you'd want to leave with everybody?
Oh, that's a tough question. It would probably...
Kind of putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, well, it would probably say something really, powerful. Directrelief.org. Google it. Looking at I can't get one word after 70 years, but I think you hope people remember directrelief.org, because then they can find out as much as they want and ask whatever questions they want. But or reachingworld.org/podcast was the other thing, because then they could hear this wonderful interviewer, but kind of a rambling guy who works in a nonprofit out in California. So anyway, thank you so much, Zach, for your time.
Great.
I really appreciate what
you're
doing with the podcast. My pleasure.
We look forward to following your organization and inspiring and encouraging others to get involved. Again, it's all volunteer basis, right? So if I'm wanting to do something for example, Hurricane Florence, would I contact your headquarters, or would I find maybe your home base there at the front lines of Hurricane Florence, or what would be the best way to get involved?
Yeah, I think either one. I think the easiest one is just probably sending an inquiry over Facebook or something, because we monitor that constantly. And I think if people want to connect, and a lot of good information of who we're working with where in Hurricane Florence areas, I think that's all online anyway, exactly where the support that we're mobilizing is going. So we love to play a connecting role for people and have that information so they can find it themselves. Sometimes that's easier than just waiting to be asked. Just make it available. What we try to do, I think, through the social media channels and website.
These episodes will be launched on Mondays and Thursdays. And if you'd like someone to be on the podcast, if you think there's someone in your network that should be recognized for the good they are doing in the world, please reach out to us and send us a direct message. We can be found at Reaching World Podcast on Facebook.com. So be sure to find us there, like our page, and submit any ideas or suggestions of individuals or organizations that should be highlighted on this podcast. Now, to finish today's episode, a couple additional ads from our sponsors.
Are you a business owner that would like to maximize your staff or sales team's production and overall performance? Go to buildyourtraining.com and see how business owners are empowering their teams by digitizing a cloud-based training platform. Again, go to buildyourtraining.com to help unleash your team's overall potential and performance.